We're in this really important series, at least to me. It's called If I Could Just Be Free. And the concept behind the series, it's about following Jesus and growing through 12 easy steps. And it's based off a program that has transformed my life, our family's life. It's called the 12 Steps. And they're used in programs like Celebrate Recovery or Alcoholics Anonymous and other things like that. And for years growing up, I heard about that stuff, and I just thought it was for addicts. But when I went through them, what I realized is it's the message of Jesus in 12 easy steps. The message of Jesus, how to grow in your faith, how to become mature in your love for Jesus. I thought, this is such a good program, And the reason programs like Alcoholics Anonymous are successful is because they're applying the supernatural teaching of Jesus. And when you see it, it's like, oh, wow, that is really cool. And Easter was all about how to give your life to Christ, which is steps 1 through 3. And last week, we talked about steps 4 through 7, and we looked at the anchors that hold us back. And you remember, I came in with these anchors attached to my belt, and I talked about how sometimes the problems of our past connect us to the issues we're facing at present. And we made a list of all of our anchors, and we confessed that list to God, ourselves, and another person, and then we humbly asked God to remove those anchors as we gave them to the cross, right? And it was a big process, but here's the thing. Last week's stuff, it was good, it was powerful, but what I didn't mention is how dragging those anchors around in your life can cause a lot of damage to others. And when I walked out on stage with those anchors on my belt, one thing that we realized as we were practicing it was they would start spinning and they would actually kind of move all over the place, hitting lights and whatnot. And I think it's actually a good analogy. When you're living with anchors of sin in your life, your sin doesn't just hurt you, it hurts others. Relationships that you have with other people. And a lot of times we miss it. Last week was specifically focused on dealing with the damage that sin causes to ourselves. This week is about bringing healing that our sin has caused to others. That's what steps 8 and 9 are about. They're really important, really powerful. And if you remember, our overarching point for these 2 weeks is that Jesus heals the spiritual curse of sin, but we still have to deal with the earthly consequences. And I think this message is one of the most important in our series. I think it will lead to the flourishing life that we want and God has designed us for. And this is really, this is what mature people do, okay? Mature Christians, mature followers of Christ, mature people who don't follow Christ. This process we're talking about today is what you do. If you want to be an actualized person, you want to do this. You're going to want to lean into it. Jesus' teaching from the Bible has set millions of people free from hurts, habits, and hang-ups. And I believe the concepts we're talking about today are why Christians have consistently higher levels of life satisfaction and more flourishing relationships. It's because of the practices that you'll be learning today. And what I'm going to do is tell a story, we're going to look at some steps and some Bible, and then I'm going to ask some questions. And these questions right here are really the important part of the message. This is what I want you to take seriously. It's what I want you to do in your life. But let's start with a story. My wife is a stellar athlete. Stellar. And you would think marrying a woman who is a great athlete is a wonderful thing. But as a guy, getting destroyed by your wife in many of the things that you do in life is really demoralizing and frustrating for me. It hurts a little bit. It hurts my feelings, to be honest. She can smoke me in basketball. That's embarrassing. As a man, all my physicality and athletic advantage, she's just nailing these fadeaway jumpers. Swish. It's like, oh my goodness. Very frustrating. And, she can beat the staff and knock out. She's good. But one of my minors in college, I haven't mentioned before, was Mario Kart Double Dash. I was very good at it, played it a lot. And the other day, we got Mario Kart, and we're playing on my mom and dad's TV. And it's been fun. I didn't expect this, but she can now beat me in Mario Kart, which is super, many of the anger problems I've mentioned in college, they came from Mario Kart. And now as a grown man who's 40, I'm really trying to not break my wrist by punching a wall, which may or may not have happened. I've always also been a distance runner. I was pretty good at distance running, and in my early 30s, I was like, I'm going to keep running and be in this and lifetime, whatever. And, for early 30s, I was running a 5K in 17:50. That's not bad for a, early 30-year-old guy. And my wife has never run. She played soccer, which is, a sport for losers. But she was doing that. Just kidding. It's a great sport, right? She's playing soccer. And she was like, you know what? I'm going to do this sport with my husband to spend more time with him. So she trains for like a month, not very long in the distance world, for 1 month. She goes, let's run a 5K together. I said, that'll be a great idea. This is a sport I'm good at. She ran it in 17 minutes and 30 seconds. She chicked me by 20 seconds, which was humiliating, and I never ran again after that. That was my last true story. So recently we've been playing a game called Cornhole. I know what I'm talking about. As soon as we got into it, I knew what the story was going to be. She'd never played, and she was going to be better than me within a day. And that is exactly what happened. And it's a bad day for her if she, in one round, only gets 2 cornholes. She's like hot like a pistol. She's really good. But honestly, our family's been having a blast. And this is our cornhole set. Dolores Heemster gave it to us years ago. And this is a pretty sick set. Look at that. I mean, that thing is awesome. That is a super cool set. We love it. Thank you, Dolores. Aside from getting destroyed by Kristen, there's one other issue, and that is the grass. You'll notice I put the boards right where they are, but this is a big dead spot. Everywhere else in our lawn is great, but this spot in our lawn is always dead. And I think a tree died there years ago. The soil's just not right. I could put seed down. I could put fertilizer down, put some lime, whatever you need to try and make that grass grow, and I can't do it. And so this is a total first world problem, but we get dirt in our feet when we play cornhole. It's hard. But at some point, soil's been damaged, nothing will grow. And I don't know what's wrong. The pH, the microbes, I don't know. Nothing grows. We try to get grass to grow, but here's what we're learning. Grass is not a bunch of individual blades of grass. It's a network of organisms that are living together in relationship. And somehow the network has been damaged. And I think so it is with our relationships in sin. You see, when you sin, it hurts you, but it also creates a dead patch and hurts the grass around you. A blade of grass on its own is pretty weak. And if you truly are alone, you'll be very vulnerable. Grass lives together in a network of relationships. And when you sin, you don't just hurt you hurt all the people around you. And here's my big overarching point of today. Sin does not just bring death to an individual. Sin hurts relationships. We do not live alone as individual people. We were made to live together in a relationship. And sin, to me, looks like a patch of dead grass. One blade that brings hurt to all the other blades around it. And what I've noticed is a lot of times you'll get like self-focused people who recognize, wow, that choice cost me my 20s. I wasted years of my life. Or they say, and this is much more common among young people, they say, well, I don't really need friends. I'm happy on my own. And biologically and scientifically, we know that statement, I'm happy on my own, is hogwash. Being relationally isolated shortens life, makes life worse. We need other people, not necessarily in marriage, but we need relational connection. God made us for it. And mature, godly people, what we recognize is my choices don't just affect me, they damage the community. And we were made for community. And these next 2 steps, they're not just about helping your little blade of grass grow. They're about identifying the dead patch that our sin has created and bringing healing to that dead patch. And I love this picture because I think it is representative of the way that our sin damages so many people around us. It's not just one dead spot. It kills this whole patch. And I hear so many people today, so many people say, well, I'm lonely. I have no close friends. I feel disconnected. And that picture to me is how we're living. And a lot of times it's because of our sin. Our anchors, our choices poison the land around us, and sin diminishes intimacy in our life. And when we fall into sins like going to work and being mad at everybody. You ever done that? You go to work and it's like, I'm surrounded by morons, everybody. What is that? What is that? That is also known as a victim mentality. I'm the only one. It's the victim mentality. We do the same thing with our kids, right? We're with our kids and we choose exasperation. Oh, these kids are the... It's a victim mentality. How about this one? Your husband irritates you when he leaves because he's not helping. And then he comes home and you're irritated with him because, he's him. What is that? That's offense and unforgiveness. And what we do through these sins is we create dead patches in our community, in our intimacy. And one day we wake up and we look around and we just feel relationally isolated because we're living in a desert of dead relationships. And we think, oh man, it's just around me. I just feel so lonely. And God says, no, you need to look in at how your sin is affecting people around you. Jesus is extremely passionate about healing the earthly effects of sin. He knows that they bring death. And I think a lot of times we think, well, you give your life to Christ and you go to heaven. But God is about so much more than just that. I mean, going to heaven is a huge deal, but he wants more than just that for you. I want you to see our key passage for today. It comes from the book of Hebrews, starting at chapter 12, looking at verses 14 and 15. Big, great passage. It says, work at living in peace with everyone. Wow. You need to work at peace. And work at living a holy life. For those who are not holy, and then check this out right here, will not see the Lord. The gravity of that statement is huge. If you want to see the Lord, you got to work at living in peace with people. See, seeing God's presence on earth, yes, a relationship with Christ comes by grace through faith in Christ. But if you want to see Christ on earth, you have to make peace with people. If you're constantly, holding grudges, lost in your head, overanalyzing, grabbing onto offenses with people, damaging relationships with people, you will not see the Lord in your life on earth. In church, what we call this, and it's a churchy phrase, but we call it quenching the Spirit. But it's destroying relationships, being offended, hopping from community to community, church to church, leaving these dead spots everywhere we go. It stops you from seeing the presence of God in your life. And then the next part gets even more convicting. Verse 15, it says, look after each other so that none of you fails to receive the grace of God. Wow. I mean, that ratchets up the risk a little bit. This and several other passages in the Bible make it clear that if you live in a state of quarreling, not like a fight one, but a state of quarreling, if you are causing all this dissension, lost in your head, in a sea of hurt feelings and offense all the time, if you create dead patches of grass constantly in the kingdom of God, you're in danger of failing to receive God's grace. That's a big deal. And then look how it ends. This is why it's our key passage. The whole analogy was built around this statement. Watch out that no poisonous root of bitterness grows up to trouble you, corrupting many. Wow. Our sin doesn't live in isolation. Our sin can corrupt many. In other words, don't let your sin cause a big dead patch. And if you're like me, and the first time I learned about this stuff, I remember thinking, uh-oh, I got some work to do. And this message is about you. It's not about your neighbor. It's about you. I know some of you are like, man, I can't wait for my husband to live. No, it's about you. I love steps 8 and 9 because they show us how to deal with the root of bitterness and that creates a desert in relationships so that we can bring flourishing relationships once more. We don't want to teach our kids and grandkids to shop around for churches, family, and life that fit our feelings. We want to show them how to cultivate a flourishing community where we are planted. I mean, those are the people that we admire, the ones who can make life, not the ones who find a place of life, but the ones who make life by healing the root, which is bitterness, so that we do not corrupt many. Let's start with the 8th step. The 8th step says this: we made a list of all the persons we had harmed, and we became willing to make an amends to them all. The thing about grace is that it's free. Have you ever noticed when something's free, you don't really take it as seriously? I mean, I think that's a big deal. At my last church, we did a class called Financial Peace University, run by this guy named Dave Ramsey. Great class. You learn about free things a little bit in that class because Dave Ramsey is a total capitalist. He charges for that class, like $400. I'm like, Dave, people are taking this class because they don't know how to manage money. How are they going to afford the class, And so we're offering this class, and I just thought, you know what, great idea, light bulb. I'm going to ask some friends to scholarship some other people in the class. So I did. I raised some money. We scholarship people in the class, and we let some families that were struggling pay nothing to go in the class. And none of the families that were scholarshiped finished the class. I was so frustrated. And I think it's because things that are free, you don't take as seriously. So next time we did the class, I said, we're only going to scholarship people at a maximum of 50%. They're going to have to pay the other part. Every single family we scholarship the second time finished the class because they counted the cost. It's easy to receive something free and not take it as seriously. I see this with healthcare. And if you notice, somebody who's 62 years old, they're like, I don't need to see the doctor. I'm tougher than the doctor. I can just by the force of my will heal myself. They turn 65, they get on Medicare, with supplement, and they're like, make it rain. Replace my knee, my shoulder, my hip, pop in that pacemaker, do whatever you got to do. All right. It's like, whoa, what happened? I'll tell you what happened. It all became relatively free. Now, after we had our 4th kid, Kristen and I was done having kids, okay? And I'm not gonna lie to you, today, this decision was like probably the biggest regret of my life. I really wish I hadn't done it. But at the time, I was done. So I called the doctor to schedule a procedure. And they asked me the details. I was like, look, I don't care. I want this as fast as I can. Where's the closest, fastest place? We need this now. Then I found out that my insurance wouldn't cover it. And it's funny how that changes the calculus significantly. All of a sudden, I don't care about closest or fastest. I mean, now I've got skin in the game. Well, I already had skin in the game. Now I've got money in the game, okay? So I spent an hour and a half on the phone. You would not believe how hard it is to figure out how much something costs. I mean, I call these places to get a hospital to tell you. I had to get billing codes for nurses, medical instrument supplier, facility fee, doctor fee, anesthesia fee. I just couldn't believe it. I was like, man, it takes a rocket scientist to figure out how much this simple little procedure costs. But I care deeply. So I'm shopping around because I'm investing my money in it. Jesus says in Matthew 6:21, wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will also be. Oh, so true. Why does God have us give to the church when, he's got cattle on 1,000 hills? Because if you want to love God more, give to the purposes of God. Because I had treasure in the game, all of a sudden, my heart cared deeply about how it was done, about who did it. In my research, this is interesting, I found out I could change my VPN, and internationally, they sell do-it-yourself kits. And I was like, it's like 10 times cheaper. Maybe I could just figure it out. And my wife was like, John, you can't install a doorknob in the house. I'm pretty sure don't do it. I was like, all right, I won't do that. But I really did. I was like, they offered a discount if you didn't do anesthesia, if you just cut that section out. I said, no problem. My wife was like, I'm not driving you there. I don't want you to do this. I was like, that's fine. I'll drive myself. I won't use anesthesia. Huge problem, big mistake. But I went from not caring at all to caring deeply because I suddenly had a huge investment in it. In 1 Corinthians 7:23, this was so big. God paid a high price for you, so don't be enslaved by the world. In other words, don't screw it up. God gave his life for you. Died on a cross for your sins. Take it seriously. It came at a high price. Step 8 is all about helping you count the cost. When you see the dead spot, when you make the list of all the people that your sin hurt, all of a sudden you understand that grace is free to you, but somebody had to pay. When you ask for forgiveness, all of a sudden you realize, wow, they gave it to me freely. That's what grace is. But they had to pay. God had to pay. Somebody had to pay. When you go through step 8, what you begin to realize is my sin, my constant irritation with everyone, my feeling like they don't respect me, or maybe my sexual compromises, my hopping from community to community, church to church, whatever, when I'm offended, marriage to marriage, it damages more than just me. And someone has to pay. When I'm asking for grace, someone has to pay for it. God, at no cost to you, forgives you and redeems you freely, but there was still a high price that was paid on the cross. And I love the 8th step in particular. I think it's among the most important in helping you not relapse into habitual sin because it helps you count the cost of grace and also the cost and the damage of sin to the community. I can remember a few times looking at how my sin issues in my life, my selfishness, my anger, my not dealing with my anxiety, created these dead spots in God's kingdom and in my life. And I can remember looking at the desert of my life relationally. I felt so disconnected, and I realized, man, this is all my fault. And it wasn't just me that I'm hurting. And in working through this step, this was the thing that galvanized me into, I'm done with that. I'm not going back. I'm not doing this anymore. My sin has hurt so many people. And once you make your list, you move on to step 9. And step 9 is also powerful. It's we make a direct amends. That means we make it right with somebody to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. You go to each person on your list and you make it right. And typically, you work out what's called the amend. You work it out with your sponsor, the person that you did your 5th step with, you confess your lists to. And I got a story about this point. I had a friend who was actually in my wedding, so that narrows it down, but you guys don't know who was in my wedding, so it's fine, okay? I had a friend who, in the midst of his sin, bought a crossbow. And you guys are like, where is this going? Let me tell you. You remember when Mike Tyson fought Evander Holyfield the second time? Remember that fight? Okay, some of you guys are too young. This is back when boxing was awesome and Mike Tyson was the greatest. And he bit Evander Holyfield's ear off. Sorry, that's not funny, but it was a kind of incredible night, right? And this is back, you remember when people do pay-per-view? You had to pay like $100 to get the fight at your house. And people would pay for this fight, and then they'd have a big watch party. And this was probably bigger than the Super Bowl. It was like the biggest deal ever. Well, my friend that night got drunk and shot his crossbow into a power transformer in Shoreview, Minnesota, right? And it's just because he wanted to watch the world burn. But the power went like boom, 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 pow, and then everything in Shoreview went out, like 100,000 households just gone. And all the lights went out, and it went out for like 5 minutes and then came back on. Everybody who lost power had to pay for the fight a second time. You know, you got your watch party, so you got to buy it again. It's just, and to this day, people will mention, do you remember the Shoreview power outage on the night of the Holyfield fight? It's like, yeah, you know, years later, my friend was long, past the statute of limitations, and he just wanted to make his life right, wanted to work through the steps. So he asked the city to let him do 200 hours of community service. That's not going to pay back the cost of whatever, but it's him counting the cost as he reflected on how his selfishness hurts so many others. He wanted to count the cost and make an amend. I love Luke 14:28. Jesus says, but don't begin until you count the cost. For who would begin construction of a building without first calculating the cost to see if there is enough money to finish it? This is such an important concept to teach our kids. When you're thinking about rebelling, when you're thinking about, my sin's not a big deal, I'll just ask God to forgive me later, I'll just count the cost first. Because what you begin to realize is, it's easy right now to say, 30's the new 20, and I'll just have my, fun time, and then, God will forgive me and whatever. You waste a decade of life partying and having fun without realizing that it's not just you that you're hurting. And when you count the cost of wasting your life in fear and offense and lost in your head, living with resentments towards most people or with pride and ego and self-indulgence, what you realize is this is not worth it. I'm not going down this road again. And when you make an amend to each person, you are seeing, wow, grace is expensive. I killed a lot of relationship and a lot of yard. This affected far more than me. I underestimated the cost. Furthermore, I like this step because what you're doing, I think, is you're healing the land. And if you want to see grass grow relationally again, you have to heal the soil. In our lawn, our dead spot, it's not just dead grass. There is damage to the soil itself. Nothing will grow there until we till it up. And I know so many people who are like, I gave my life to Christ. I'm sober now, so take me back. I'm not, why won't you take me back? And listen. Slow down, Turbo. God's grace is free. You are forgiven completely by God, but you damage the land of your relationships. And there is a process of healing that needs to take place with earthly relationships. The spiritual curse of sin is removed. But for your family, for the people closest to you, there's a process of healing that needs to take place. And I love steps 8 and 9 because that is the process. And I watched this, I remember one of the most poignant examples of this was watching God work through this process in my wife's heart in a transformative way. Completely changed our lives. And I asked her to come back this week, and I know it's going to end up being like 3 weeks in a row that we have her out here. I'm not trying to shoehorn her in. I have no other agenda with her sharing other than I just think that her testimony in this is a powerful example to us all. And what I like in particular about your story is that you weren't like an addict, you weren't an alcoholic, you were a woman trying to grow in her faith in Jesus. And God used these steps to bring healing to you and to me and to our marriage and to so many relationships, honestly. And I think for us as a church, I want you to understand, we're not processing this if you have an addiction in the formal sense. We're processing this together if you want to grow in your faith in Jesus. So Kristen, would you share your story, please, with us?
Absolutely. And I love that I get to share this because working the steps really did bring me closer to Jesus and gave me a lot more freedom. And what Pastor John is describing about the desert, it was my life. If I didn't like a relationship, I blamed them and cut them out of my life. And I really believe that if I stayed that way and I stayed with that mentality, I would have jumped from church to church, chasing something I don't even know if I could have named. And also, I really think, and John and I have talked about this, that if I would have stayed with this mentality, I would have hopped from marriage to marriage. On the outside, I thought I looked pretty good, but I was so lonely. And in the quiet, I found myself hating the life I was living. I was partying every weekend. And I remember one night I ended up at this terrible nightclub that, I went there a lot. They probably knew me by name. It's kind of sad. It was called Sneaky Pete's in Minneapolis. And I remember looking around that place, and I was trying to look for life because I knew I was not living. And I'm there and I'm looking and I realize everyone around me appears so relationally dead too. See, I lived in the sea of shallow relationships, frantic parties, and relationally dying people because I lived in a mentality of self-pity and feeling like everyone was out to get me. I had a spirit of offense. If you did something to me, I easily hung on to it and never would forgive it. And a well-disguised selfishness that left me lost in my head time and time again. I had poisoned and killed my mind through my sin. Then one day, in my brokenness, I chose to work my steps, and I made an amends to a lot of people. And again, it was truly a healing process. And so many people that I had barriers or I had burned bridges with, I got free. And so I went and made amends to these people. And some people, like my exes, I knew it was going to be harmful to go to them and make an amends. So my Dina, the woman that was coaching me in this, she told me to write a letter to them and burn it. I remember some people that I went to and owned my part, asked for forgiveness, made an amends. I went up to them and I remember them responding with, well, you did this too, and this, and this. And remember that time? And I just stood there and I listened, and I owned it. But the most transformational moment for me in this process was when I made an amends to my dad. There was a lot of sin there that stemmed from unforgiveness and hurt that I had taken towards him. See, I became sexually active at 15, and he taught me better than that. And in an effort to please my boyfriend and out of guilt for what we'd already done, I let that happen. And my dad found out, and he was so sad and so hurt. He didn't talk to me and avoided me for like 6 weeks. And for like 6 years, I held on to that hurt and unforgiveness. And through this step, I realized that it was my sin that poisoned him and brought death to him and turned and poisoned me back. My mentor, Dina, was so clear to me that before I went up to him, she's like, this is not about you bringing up things about him on how he hurt you. This is about owning your part and making an amends to him. So I went to him, and do you ever have those memories that are so vivid? Like I can remember the weather, I can remember the place, I can remember the time of day, and I was so nervous. And I went up to him and I was like, Dad, will you forgive me? I'm so sorry that I did this. And he hugged me and he told me that his sadness and anger were rooted in that he knew that my actions were going to hurt me in the long run. And I was able to look back at him and say, they did. You were right. He told me he loved me. He told me he was proud of me. And if you come from a family where words of affirmation are not a thing, you know how much those words meant to me. And it was one of the most healing moments of my life. But I'm going to tell you, it wasn't easy. I didn't want to do it. I was so scared. But counting the cost of grace, understanding the gravity of my sin, it transformed my perspective on it, and it was the beginning of freedom. From falling into a pattern of self-pity and self-loathing, falling into offense time and time again, running away from people and things that hurt me. Today, I have the best life because of Jesus. Because I understand that Jesus paid a price for me. I don't take his grace for granted. And I love living life, counting the costs.
And I'm so grateful to God for his grace in our lives and what he did in your life through the 12 steps, because you really were a person who was a runner.
Right.
And you did have a relational desert, like many of us do, and you have just this flourishing life. I mean, I imagine, Kristens' relational connections are like a lush, perfect green lawn. And it is because of the grace of Jesus and this spiritual maturing process that you had the discipline to go through. And I'm just thankful to God for it. So thank you, Kristen, so much.
Having me.
I want to look at our key passage again, and I think having taught this process, it's going to hit you different as we look at it a second time. Hebrews 12, 14, and 15, it says, work at living in peace with everyone. And I think understanding peace takes work. You know, if you have issues in your life, it takes work. Work at living a holy life. For those who are not holy will not see the Lord. And I think there's a lot of us, you know, we have, well, I'm a good person, a lot of this, a lot of that. We try to ignore our role in creating the dead patches. And we don't see God's work in our life. We know there's something missing spiritually. I mean, you see some other people, it's like, man, they really got it going on spiritually. And me, it's because we don't understand that we need God's grace in our life. Look after each other so that none of you fails to receive the grace of God. Watch out that no poisonous root of bitterness grows up to trouble you, corrupting many. I just wonder if there are any poisonous roots in our hearts today that have been corrupting many. It is our sin so often that gives other people a root for bitterness. And we sit there and we blame them for our problems. I mean, I loved Kristens' story. She had this deep bitterness for her father because, you know, he turned his back on her in her hour of need, but really it was her sin that brought it on. And some of you, I know this message is for you because God is opening your eyes to the pain that sin is causing. It's not a process that you work once. See, sin always impacts us and the people around us. I watched God heal my wife's heart and life through these steps. And I said, I got to do that. And I watched a similar process of healing in my own life. And today I want that for you. I don't want you to live a life of isolation with shallow relationships, going to your own version of sneaky peeks, looking for life. Our sin plays such a big role in our life. Let's deal with it this week. Receive grace from Christ, but deal with the earthly consequences. I know some of you might be a little daunted because you recognize, John, it's like my life, it's not a dead patch. It's like Indiana Dunes out there, man. I mean, it's a lot of sand. Well, look, start the process now and give your children and their children the gift of flourishing relationships and a beautiful, lush, interconnected community. As I wrote this message, I just, in my mind's eye, imagined teenage daughters initiating and apologizing to their mothers and making amends. You might be younger, but don't let others look down on you because you're young. Set an example for older believers in your life. I see sons pursuing fathers and making it right. I see generational healing happening. I see people humbling themselves and owning their role and starting the hard work of uprooting bitter roots and healing the land. This message, like I said, concludes with two questions. And I think these are powerful. I want you to try them no matter where you're at in life. Rich, poor, old, young, male, female, child, adult, please work these questions. First question, do you have dead spots in the land of your relationships that you need to address? I don't want you to own someone else's role. I don't want you to say, it's my mother's, it's my father's. What I love about this, you know, Kristen, she's like, well, it's my dad's fault. And her sponsor's like, no, it's not. It's your fault. Your sin is at the root of this. And I want us to address it. I don't want us to live life with these awkward areas and these things and these places we can't go. Deal with it. And then number two, and this is the challenging one, who in your life do you need to make an amend to? I don't want you to sit there and just think, oh yeah, you know, I got that dead spot. I want you to make it right this week. Bring healing. Jesus died for us while we were still sinners. They might have sin in their life. They might not be perfect, but I want us to deal with our role. Dealing with the bitter roots so that we don't corrupt many. I can't wait to see what God does in our community through his gospel and through this message. As we close at all locations, please stand to your feet. Let's have a prayer. Lord God, I thank you for how practical you are. You're the God of evidence, not the God of blind faith. You surround us with evidence. We don't have enough faith to reject you. We know you're real. And today I ask that you'd give us eyes to see and courageous hearts. I ask that you'd heal relationships. You'd heal dead spots in our community. Would you bring life to places where there isn't any? Lord, you created us for great relationships, not just with you, but with people around us. And I ask that First Church would be known by our love for one another. Would you give us the courage to take action on this message today? It's in your name we pray. All God's people said amen and amen.